What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the QQQ and break down what's going on with the tech sector right now and how this could actually end up moving going into the next couple of trading days to next few weeks. Now, before I break anything down about this, before I talk about how on this could end up playing out, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, it's up to you. You're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 2 days. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So anyways, when it comes to the QQQ, this thing actually got a bit of a pump over the last couple of weeks. And since then, it's been trading kind of sideways, showing some signs of weakness. And the real question is, how is this actually going to move? But I actually want to use TradingView for this part and actually break down our fib retracements and also some structures that developed in the past. Now, to start us off, we could actually use Elliott Wave to encompass, the price action that came over the last couple of weeks. Starting like way down here at this very bottom, we had our 1 from the sequence, right? Then we had this 2 retracement, 3 was the bigger wave, 4 and then 5 ended up being the strongest wave of them all. Typically it's 3 that's the strongest, but this actually encompassed this price action very nicely going into February. Excuse me. And then in February, we had a bit of a sell-off, right? And this is also resembling kind of like an ABC structure in a way, where we actually had our A going down this time, our B that formed. This could be like our C, our D, and then one more final drop down. And this actually took us into like the mid-March area. So now the question is, what are we doing right now? And this is actually a matter of interpretation because we actually had a pump here, drop, 3, 4, 5. It's actually kind of tricky. I don't know if the peak is in. I don't really use this very often when I trade. There are 2 different interpretations of this. You could argue that for this structure, we have a very weird looking structure where we had this like 1, it's about this 309 area. Then we retraced back down to 300 almost, because we dropped like $9. That's almost 3%. Actually, that's almost, let me see, that's almost like 3% actually, yeah. And then, we get one more pump back to like 315. Then we come down, and then we push all the way up for the final wave. So that's the like first interpretation of it, assuming the top is in. And if that's the case, right, we saw the QQQ, the NASDAQ come all the way back down to almost 313 before trying to bounce from here. This is actually the 0.236 retracement area. And a very common retracement is the 0.786 and also the 618, right? And that would take us to this 299 to 292 area. We also happen to have a gap very close by. So this is starting to look like there is buying exhaustion and it's starting to show some weakness. But we can't solely look at the technicals. You can't forget that we have a lot of earnings coming out, especially big tech earnings in a couple of weeks. But to start us off, we have Charles Schwab, then we have First Bank, we have Netflix and Bank of America. Goldman Sachs is a big one. Then we also have IBM, Morgan Stanley, and Tesla and Discover, all in the next 3 trading days. It does slow down a bit for Thursday and Friday, but Monday through Wednesday are going to be massive. But going back into the QQQ chart, there's another way you could interpret this. This would just be like the assumption that the top is in and earnings are just not as great. Maybe this thing fails to break this high and it just starts downtrending. This is how this would actually look if that ends up being the case. But if we end up seeing something different, considering the fact that volume has been slowing down, we've seen this downtrend in volume like an uptrend in the price. Once again, not the strongest of structures, but it still maintains this very nice composure. You can see volume like right here was very consistent. And as volume was dropping, then we saw the price start a downtrend. You could argue it might be trying to downtrend. We just don't know for sure. But I do believe there's downside coming, right? And part of that is because of the fact that we have many different bearish signals developing on the PPOs, also based off volume, a volume analysis, and also based off of the divergences forming on SPY, and many sell signals which are suggesting the top is coming. But for SPY, I was basically thinking that we might pump a little more and then we dump, or we just dump from here, right? It's got to be one of those two. For the QQQ, I would presume it's the same, but this will be more dependent on tech earnings. However, I'm thinking it's either going to pump a little more and then it dumps, or it just dumps from here and we just start to see some downtrend and bearish price action going into next week. If we assume the top is in, then we could draw out our Elliott wave like this. But then another way of drawing it would be we basically take the line here. We assume this whole move was 1. This move to about 316 was actually our 1. Then this is our 2, right? The 3 was the move up here, which actually came about 2 weeks ago. 4 is going to be the drop. And if we pump off earnings, all right? If we pump off earnings going into this week, then we could be forming our final wave 5. That's like the more bullish possibility before we see more downside and maybe like another ABCDE structure, whatever you want to use. Maybe it's an ABC structure all the way back down. It's got to be one of those two. It's very hard to tell depending on earnings. And I also want to note that looking at the structure, we could also draw out a very simple looking trend line. Don't know if this is still going to hold. We could just try it from like this end here to about right here. See, we have like support that's actually holding us up quite nicely. You could even argue that this is starting to resemble a giant rising wedge. I know I'm just roughly drawing this, but you could make that argument, of course. Maybe it's a little bit more slanted in like this direction. You could draw it like this as well. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Kind of looks like a rising wedge, right? This rejection here, rejection, bounce, rejection. If it does bounce from here and it keeps going, it could be in a topping process. But then the thing about these rising wedges is they don't have to play out perfectly. We don't have to go all the way to the top before it reverses. If we get a break below the trend line, right, if this thing comes all the way down below our very important support around this 313 area, which is the 0.236 retracement, then there's a chance the QQQ could come and retest the 310 to 309 area to fill this gap down here. And if that happens, it could actually continue to drop to the 0.5 retracement around this 303 area. It all depends on how the chart moves going into next week. But my best presumption is going to be that it's either going to get a pump and form a divergence depending on earnings, and then this thing dumps later as we get closer to May, or it could just start kind of pulling back a bit going into this week that's coming. It could already be done. It all depends on if the high is in or not. So what does that tell us about the chart from Webull? What I'm seeing on here is we basically have a lot of supply and demand zone. I know I'm kind of like hiding some of the drawings from this end. We could basically extend this all the way up here. But either way, right, we have important resistance around this area going up to about almost 21. It depends on if we could break this or not. If we break it, then we could try to get closer to 324. I just don't know for sure. What I do believe is the fact that we're getting some signs of weakness, right? It's starting to show some weakness. And as it shows weakness, we're likely going to see a reversal soon. What I'm still trying to figure out is, could this thing pump a little more and then retrace, or is it just going to retrace from here? It's got to be one of those two. And I would love to say this from a more technical standpoint. From a technical standpoint, it's showing some weakness, but it once again depends on earnings, which could be very, very unpredictable. We had this like uptrend that was being respected. We did break out of this before. You could even redraw this as a giant rising wedge, kind of like this, right? So it's just a matter of a couple of days. We'll just have to see how this ends up moving. In my opinion, though, I do believe that we are showing some signs of buyer exhaustion and could be getting ready for something more bearish to come. But it will depend on earnings. Let's just see how Tesla does, especially on Wednesday. I also want to note that a very important support to be watching for is that 50 EMA. Right here, when we dropped below it, we have a tendency of bouncing right above it after a couple of hours. We're actually very close to it. So I'll be watching this like 310 zone on the 4-hour time frame. It's just a matter of time. I also want to note that this weakness from a technical standpoint, it looks like, in my opinion, like the price is trying to hold up, but the technicals are getting a little weaker, which is oftentimes a sign of possible strength, right? So it's possible that we could still be in this bullish structure. It's not done developing yet. And we might get another pump depending on how earnings goes. Still very possible as we held this support quite nicely, very close to where it was. So it's just a matter of earnings, but I want to note that it's very possible for us to get one more pump for wave 5. I'm now seeing like this could be wave 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just one last 5. One last big push before this thing starts to reverse. Or it could just, once again, things could change. Because NVIDIA is also looking relatively weak. They do have earnings in about 2 weeks, but I just want to note that we have this head and shoulders structure. If that plays out, not going to look too good. Apple is also looking kind of weak because Apple has it almost has like a double top that formed here. It actually touched 166. So it almost has a double top. If it rejects there, this could actually be a very bearish signal. Apple also is on the verge of forming another divergence because right here we can actually see that the price was well above where the RSI level was. I think on the hourly it shows it a little bit better. So it really is just a matter of time. Right here, this is where the divergence formed, marking this like temporary top. And we'll see if this does form again. But until then, it's just a matter of being patient. I believe Apple is showing some signs of weakness. It's definitely in a topping process. And I do believe a top is coming for the NASDAQ. Considering how low the VIX is, we can even look at the SQQQ and other things, but that's going to be best for another video. Until then, just know earnings is going to be determining whether or not the top is in on the QQQ or not. And it looks to me like we're developing a bearish trend once this actually breaks below the falling wedge, which is likely going to happen relatively soon. But until then, let's just be patient. Let's wait and see how this ends up developing. I just want to note that I have some merch for you guys if you are interested in actually buying something to show your support for the channel, or if you want to buy a shirt that says "to the moon" or something like that. It really is your choice. It's going to be either above or below the comments section. If you use the code SAVE5, you're going to save 5% on your order. So please check it out if you guys are interested. Until then, I thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. Mark it to the moon since the long term is bright. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.